next to last episode of Moon Knight has debuted, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your thoughts on the latest episode of Moon Knight, as well as the show up to this point in time. As this is a spoiler review, feel free to spoil away down below in the comments section. No need for a spoiler warning, and if you haven't watched the episode yet, you have been warned. So up to this point in time, I haven't done week-to-week reviews of Moon Knight, and that wasn't really intentional. It's just kind of the way the month played out. Some combination of the way they gave critics access and how I had to watch the first 4 episodes, combined with the specific day that the show debuted, and then a week later I left town, and the week after that my wife was out of town. It's kind of played out in a way where I didn't review it, but I've had a lot to say. I just haven't been available and free to say it. So with all that said, we're back to doing some week-to-week reviews, so let's talk about the show. And we'll kick things off with my spoiler-filled thoughts on episode 5, and then at the end of the video, we'll talk about my thoughts on the season as a whole. And this week's episode kicks off right where last week's episode ended, with them in the psychiatric ward, but something fishy's going on here because we got a talking hippopotamus. All the people at the psychiatric ward are characters from the show up to this point in time, and essentially in this episode, it's Mark having to actually dive into his past and process what led to the creation of Steven. And so the globe trotting, the relic hunting, the tomb raiding, as well as the superhero hijinks, all of that is put on hold so that we can have an episode that is all about why is Mark the way that Mark is. And so in doing so, essentially, they're in the Egyptian afterlife, the underworld, on their journey to their final resting point, and they have to find a way to balance the scales by processing through, or Mark has to process through his past. Thus, we kind of dive into his memories, and it's of course not a plot-heavy episode. Essentially, what I just said is the whole episode of just them going through memories, and it occasionally cuts back to our main villain as psychiatrist guy trying to help. But otherwise, we're just going through memories, and at the very end of it, in the middle of it, we kind of learn the upper world, the real world, is in some sort of chaos, probably because of what Harrow is doing, and they have to go back. They have to find a way to free the powers of Moon Knight to fix the body and balance the scales so they can go back to the body that hopefully has been fixed. That's it. That's all that happens. But it's an episode that goes back in time to explore our character. And I think in the context of this show, that actually works really effectively. That's what they did with the next to last episode of WandaVision, and I don't think it worked there. In the setting, the context of that show, they spent so much time on a bunch of different things that at the point in time where they needed to like up the stakes and set up the finale, instead of doing that, they did an episode where they let's rewind and let's look at Wanda's past and what got us to this point in time and give us an exposition dump. And it was heartbreaking, and it gave us information, but in the context of that show, it kind of felt like it just kind of slammed on the brakes. Whereas I feel like with this show, they've established the stakes, the threat, the looming danger of, if this guy gets this item, if he gets control, this thing is freed and we're in big trouble. That's what the first 4 episodes were all about. So we get to the point in time where that person grabs that, and then we push pause to do our exposition dump episode, our backstory episode, where you really unpack our lead character. But it's interesting that of these Marvel Disney Plus shows, seems almost like they're trying to figure out their templates, their formulas for how they structure the shows. And you have 2 of them where the next to last episode is like, now let's unpack our lead character's trauma. Now let's dig in and figure out why our character is the way that they are. They do it as an exposition flashback episode as the next to last one. Seems like a really specific type of thing, and to make it the next to last episode is really specific. So what do we kind of learn throughout this is that Mark had a brother that they went out exploring when it was about to go rain, and Mark's mother said, "Hey, protect your brother." And instead of protecting his brother, he kind of was like, "Hey, let's go on an adventure. Let's go into this cave." So they go into this cave. It starts to rain. The waters rise, and his brother drowns. And then his mother blames him for that, and is physically, emotionally, and every other form of abuse that you can, I guess they don't imply sexual, so not every other form, but all sorts of abuse, just extraordinarily traumatic behavior where the mom told a child, "You're in charge of this other child," and then blamed the child moving forward that something terrible happened, which there's a side to it of like he did make a choice that led to something terrible happening, but that's also why you don't trust a child to watch another child out when it's raining and other that's why parents are in charge and responsible for things. That's the whole point. And so he's just carried this weight of knowing that he made a choice that led to his brother's death, and then lived with his entire childhood, his mother using that as a club against him, and just not showing up to his birthdays, tormenting him at his birthdays, physically abusing him. And through this, we kind of learn that in one of these episodes where his mom was freaking out and about to abuse him, he detaches and creates the Steven personality for the sake of having a side to him that doesn't know that his mother was awful and doesn't know that there was a brother. And so it's this escape personality to get away from the pain of what really did happen. And then we kind of go through these little episodes, and we learn that he goes off into the military and joins the military, and then at some point in time goes into a fugue state, which is where you kind of detach and walk off, which in the case of him goes into a Steven state. Steven walks off. Mark's no longer in control, and when you're in the military, you can't do that. So he's kicked out of the military, and because of that decides to join up with the guy that ended up being responsible for Layla's father dying. You kind of learn the story of it. He tried to save the father. He was very much trying to do the right thing, and himself should have died. And on that mission is where he ends up at the cave where he gains the powers of Moon Knight. And we kind of see the perspective of it. Even there, this Egyptian god clearly was manipulating him, taking advantage of all sorts of things about him. And Steven's kind of almost the voice of reason, like, dude, like, even from the beginning, you're being manipulated and lied to. Like, yeah, you're working for that's a bad dude. Like, maybe you're doing some good in the world, but there's a lot of bad in this too. This is not in any way like a pure force at work in your life. But because this deal is made, Mark doesn't die from the bullet wounds and continues on as this split personality. And we learn that the reason that why did the world start to like blend together and break the way that they have been is because at Mark's mother's funeral, he kind of finally starts to snap a little bit and creates this persona, like Steven starts getting more control as this person living on, believing that his mother's still alive and she's a good person. And that's kind of what led to the events of this show, where there is kind of this chaos between the two of them, going back and forth without control. And so it's an episode that is very much like, let's just look at the past. Let's look at what happened to them. Let's learn about this Mark guy that led to Steven. It's interesting because Steven has very much, for the most part, been our point of reference character. And then in this episode, we learn he's not the real one. He's not real. Mark is the real guy. Steven is the invented personality. And so we've been following around the lie, the made up person. But to Steven, it's not made up. To Steven, it's just his reality. And to us, that was just our point of reference character that brought us into this world. And so it's fascinating the way perspective changes things, which even goes back to a discussion that Harold was having at the psychiatric ward in the last episode about a pin and what it is, depending on your perspective, determines your reality. And then you have a whole episode where you learn our point of reference character, the person we've been following, He's the lie. He doesn't have a backstory. He is the escape. Oh, that's interesting the way that worked out. Huh. Okay. So it leads kind of the end of the episode where the scales are almost balanced, and then all the dead start trying to pull them into the sands and stuff like that. And this big fight breaks out, and Steven essentially sacrifices himself to free Mark. And with Steven dying, the scales are balanced, and Mark is free to return to his body if they can find a way to free the Moon Knight power and thus heal the body. And as I said before, as an episode that is an exposition dump, it's a very effective exposition dump. That the whole show is built on kind of this mystery of what's going on here. Like, how did he gain these powers? What went down with Layla's dad? And which one is real? Steven, Mark, who's the real personality? What went on here? There just seems like there's a lot of brokenness. And so it's the episode that answers all those questions. And the answer to every single one of those questions is gut-wrenching. It's just horribly traumatic. And so while it's not an action episode, it's very effective at getting you invested in the characters and giving answers that feel satisfying, that have emotional resonance to them, rather than being like, okay, yeah, okay, something bad happened. Okay. No, I mean, this was really traumatic stuff. And it lays it on so heavy, and you're just sitting in death of a child abuse, neglect from beginning to end. And so just kind of a very exhausting episode because of all that it does and kind of sucking the energy out of you. But I'd have to stop and think about where did I kind of rank the episode, but I would say this is one of the best episodes, despite not really being a superhero episode, despite being very weird, and it's all about Egyptian religion and mythology. There's a talking hippopotamus guiding them with a funny voice, but it's so good on an emotional level that's really what matters. It's effective at what it's trying to do. And so, especially as someone, I watched the first 4 episodes a month ago. And so this is the first episode in basically a month for me. And it certainly packed an emotional punch. All right, from there, let's talk about my thoughts on the show as a whole up to this point in time. The way that they gave critics episodes to this show, I'm not particularly a fan of. It's nice to get like the first 2 episodes and be able to have a good impression of the show, to do an initial review before the show debuts, to give you guys our thoughts on it, to know what to expect. But when you give us 2/3 of the show, that for me, as a fan, as someone that likes to watch it along with all of you, just because I'm a critic doesn't take away the fact that I want to be a part of the moment with all of you. And you lose that when you watch so much of it in a single binge session for the purpose of creating content. And that's maybe even a learning lesson for me. If in the future they just do this again, I might sit it out, might only review the first 2 episodes or something like that. I might make a different choice, because I think my enjoyment of this show and my experience of this show was hurt because of the way that they gave critics content. And that's not to whine and complain about, the stupidest thing to whine and complain about, but I feel like I've missed out on the fun of the week-to-week viewing of the show. But because I watched it in a binge session a month ago, and then I rewatched all 4 episodes yesterday, I guess in a different binge session, and I've had kind of time to process it a little bit differently and kind of observe the conversations, I'd say in general, I feel like this show is it's trying to do a few too many things. I guess that's the way to put it. Like, there's a bunch of things I love about it. Oscar Isaac is just knocking it out of the park with his performance. It's something so different from the MCU. It takes influence from a bunch of things that I enjoy. It has a sense of humor to it, but it's not typical MCU sense of humor. It's a little bit different from what you normally get. And then you get today's episode, and it's just so emotionally potent. But it's a show called Moon Knight, and Moon Knight essentially isn't in 3 of the episodes. Or actually, we're 5 episodes in. And Moon Knight was only prominent in 2 of the episodes. I mean, that's the way to phrase it. Where episode 1, Moon Knight shows up in the last, 10 seconds or something. You get a little bit of Moon Knight in there. And then these last 2 episodes, Moon Knight has been gone. There was tomb raiding in last week's episode, and so there was adventure in it, and there was action in it, but Moon Knight, the powers had been taken away, and then in this episode, obviously, they were locked up. And of course, I'm sure Moon Knight will return, and we'll get a big finale with lots and lots of Moon Knight action. But it's just kind of an odd experience when it's like, this show's called Moon Knight. It's all about this particular character and these warrior robes, and then that's a very small part of the show. And also when you have a lead character who has split personalities, and so you're kind of switching between the two of them, there's always kind of a tension there of like, you want more of the other one, more to kind of figure out what's going on with the other one. So kind of an odd experience. I'm interested to see how it'll close out with the last episode. Tied together. What I guess even first episode is kind of this confusion. What's going on here? And then it's globe trotting, and now we're in the afterlife. So it's just a lot of different stuff in only 6 episodes. And that's, I mean, I think they're figuring out as they go along the right links and what have you to do with all these. But, you know, it feels like this is a show that to do all the things they wanted to do and explore these 2 personalities, have plenty of Moon Knight action, go globetrotting, and go into the literal afterlife and come back and have a big finale. You probably needed more episodes to do all of that, because you're just moving so quickly from episode 1, it's all Steven and what's going on here. Episode 2, it's Steven with Mark in the mirror kind of guiding him. And then episode 3, we get a Mark episode. Episode 4, and then Steven's back in control. And then we're in the afterlife, and we've got both of them talking with each other. And so it's just hopping very quickly from a lot of different things and moving quickly in a way that, I don't know, a little bit more breathing room probably would have been nice. Certainly more Moon Knight probably would have been nice. We have one more episode. We'll see how it plays out. And I don't want to say in any way imply that I'm not enjoying it. I am. I like having this very different MCU story that's not afraid to get weird. Like, it keeps doing stuff where I'm like, man, is this too weird? Or do I love the fact that it's this weird? That it's doing something so out there in left field, in leaning so hard into the Egyptian mythology, and at the same time, it's about very human brokenness. A lead character whose trauma isn't sensational. It's not fantastic. At least what caused so much of what drives the split personality of this character, it doesn't come from the fantastical. It comes from very human trauma. And so it's combining the weird and the human very much so together. So hopefully I didn't make that sound a little bit too negative. Just trying to process my experience watching the show a month ago and then thinking about it for about a month and then rewatching it yesterday and like just feeling like it moves so quickly through a lot of things, while at the same time I like each of one of the pieces. I love that it's different. Certainly the lead character. There's so many things I do enjoy about it. And there's other things where it's very weird how little Moon Knight is in Moon Knight. And so some stuff like that just kind of popped out to me. We got one more episode. Very excited to see how this show closes out. And some of these Marvel Disney Plus shows haven't stuck the landing entirely, where they can feel a little bit rushed. I think they've done the groundwork that they need, because it was just so clear in the first 4 episodes what they were kind of building towards. And so you can have your big film. I think you can. But then again, we still have to revive Moon Knight, Mark, and have our big showdown and then have our epilogue. So still, that's a lot to put in one episode in and of itself. So curious how it all play out, but I'll be back next week to give my final thoughts on Moon Knight, the finale, the season as a whole, and then do episode ranking, all that fun stuff. And next week's Doctor Strange too. So next week's a big week for Marvel content. Let me know what you thought about everything down below in the comment section, and I'll see you back here next week for a big week of Marvel content. Bye-bye.